Thank you, Rachel, and hello, everybody. I assume you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So it's an honor to be here with you, and thank you for the opportunity. I have a few slides to share, so we can jump in. And I start with a couple of comments up front. So I'm dialing in from Zurich. I represent the Jacobs Foundation, and we've been working in the EdTech space for about 18 months now. So it reminds me a bit of the time I was in McKinsey, and you would do a project for 1 week, the first time you ever see an industry. And then a week later, you're the expert and the whole company is calling you for advice. So I feel a bit the same way here. I think we're very new in this. We're very much learning. But the one, I think, message for those looking at that tech sector, whether in the foundation world or in the university world, is it's very easy to quickly get up to speed. It's a very fast moving and dynamic sector. And so we feel that we've learned a lot. We have a lot to learn, and happy just to share our journey so far. So first, a few words maybe about the foundation. So we come from the Jacobs family and the Jacobs holding. We were very active in the coffee and cocoa industries. So you may know brands like Toblerone, Milka. Those are part of the Jacobs family. And then Adecco, the HR staffing company, was also built by Klaus Jacobs. Since then, the investments have changed of the holding. We are active in dentistry, in international education with Cognita, and we continue to hold an important stake in Barry Callebaut, the largest cocoa trader globally. And the foundation is the beneficial owner of these assets, and our source of our funding comes from a dividend that we receive every year from these investments. We've been around for a little over 30 years. We were founded in 1989, historically really looking at research, very interested in funding and supporting research in child and youth development. And then gradually over time, thinking about how this research can convert into action and into system transformation. And so we've been always focused on learning, on field building, and on trying to move the needle when it comes to learning and child development. And last year, we established a 10-year strategy, which I'll share a little bit more about and explain where EdTech fits in. Overall, the focus of our work is on what we call variability in learning. And so what research tells us is actually that learners, be they children or adults, are really built in very unique ways. And the education systems that we've created to date are really meant to be one size fits all. They put everybody on a standard path. And so we think this actually is very suboptimal. And we want to understand and learn ways in which systems can adapt to unique learner needs. We think this is a very rich potential research area. And we think also that the idea of learner variability is needed actually in any education system. So it's interesting talking to an audience in Hong Kong where, in most conversations, when you mention Hong Kong, people will think this is the target education system. All education systems should seek to be like Singapore, like Hong Kong. But I know, having talked to other very successful education systems, that no system is perfect. And even the best performing systems on international rankings are thinking about ways to improve. And so the need to adapt systems to individual needs is something that we think is true across the spectrum, across the world, in every educational context in which we can work. So we look at EdTech as a potential way to address the idea of learner variability. And we really did a quick sort of survey to understand the landscape. And we developed a hypothesis that's rooted in the problem listed on this slide. So we, even before COVID-19, EdTech was this growing field, a lot of attention, a lot of funding going into EdTech. But on the research side, not as much. So we see a lot of companies very successful, but the proof of whether that product works or not, or what impact it has on learning, or when it works, when it doesn't work, there was not so much of that available. There's some evidence of things that work, but this evidence is really not used when customers, be they parents or schools, choose to make purchasing decisions. It's not really used when investors make investment decisions. And so we wanted to think about how we could try to address this problem. We also see across the world the real challenge of building a viable business model in the K-12 space. And I should mention that the foundation is really focused, when we talk about learning and development, on children. officially up to the age of 12, but certainly on basic education. And so in this space, companies have to either sell to schools or to parents, to make it very simple. And both of those customers have their own challenges. And so you see a lot of struggle to develop viable business models in this space, which actually makes you think that you need a different type of capital, a different type of engagement to help companies succeed in this environment. Lastly, you talk about impact washing. And so every fund now seems to be an impact investing fund. And so impact, we think, has kind of, in some cases, lost meaning. And so we want to try to think about a new way to think around impact investing, where the core of what we look at is the efficacy of investments and of products. And so that's the kind of the cornerstone of the lens that we use when we look at this activities in this space. And we think the foundation, we have done some impact investing prior to this strategy. We've done a lot of work in research. So the crux of what we're doing is really combining these two worlds of research and of investing. And so we created a three-pronged strategy. I think this has probably been shared already in advance, and we've been public with this. So we really started looking at venture capital funds focused on edtech. And when COVID hit, there was a lot of funding coming into these funds, a lot of attention placed, and we thought, it would be interesting to try to affect the space by becoming an investor in the funds. So we created what we call LAIF, the Learning EdTech Impact Funds, and I'll share a little bit more about that later. But essentially, this is a commercial activity where we invest in these funds. We expect to earn a return, and we had a lot of challenge because this is something very common in the U.S., but in Europe and in Switzerland, much less accepted for foundations to play such a role. And so we had a lot of discussions with our tax authorities, and ultimately we wanted to create a programmatic approach to this that required that all the proceeds and the returns generated by these investments are essentially put back into the foundation's activities. And so we established a research collaboration that we call Saras, that's connecting the edtech research ecosystem to really connect the leading thinkers on the space of edtech globally, connect them with one another, and move the agenda forward on key issues related to edtech in society. And so the returns from the investments support financially the research work. And then the things that we learn from this research, we hope will come back and support the various investments that we've made in funds and in their companies. And then all of this is we want to actually move the system as well. So what we've seen in a lot of the funds in which we've invested, there are a lot of other like-minded limited partners. But each of these partners comes with a very particular agenda and focus, and generally they don't collaborate well. So we wanted to create this platform with other investors, mostly foundations, that we call the EdFirst Alliance, which is EdTech Foundations investing in research and systems transformation. To be essentially a place where we could exchange ideas, thoughts, investment opportunities, learnings, and really speak with a common voice when it comes to this area. So a little bit about each one of these. This will be quick. On Saras, we've picked a set of themes that we really focus on. So digital divides, making education accessible, computer-supported collaborative learning, algorithmic education, and evidence-based brain science-inspired digital learning. So these are themes where we find the top researchers in the field, we support core research, and then we try to bring this research together with the companies in the portfolio of our funds. And the LAIF program, so LAIF actually came from Leif Erikson, which was believed to be the first European to set foot in North America. So we thought this was a fun way to especially explain what we're trying to do, because we have invested in 9 funds and 5 of those funds are in the US. So again, very unusual thing for a European foundation to be investing in such ways in the US. But we've also identified key European funds, EduCapital, one of these funds, we have Litsi who will be joining the panel. And we have one fund in Asia called Kaizenvest, which is based in Singapore, but primarily looking at the Indian market. And essentially these funds we've gone through, we've invested, we have a side letter with each fund where we lay out what we're trying to achieve. We engage with them through their advisory committees. We work with companies that are promising to help promote opportunities of research collaboration together with our Saras program. And we try to introduce ideas around evidence in the decision-making of these funds. It's still very early days, as I said, so it's difficult to have strong conclusions, but I do feel we have a lot of interest and alignment with our fund partners. And lastly, even earlier stages, the At First Alliance, and here is essentially we looked and saw who was investing alongside ourselves in these funds. We got them together, and we will be bringing them physically together in a conference we're hosting in May, together with all the other stakeholders in these initiatives. And the goal here is to get people to exchange ideas, as I mentioned, convene periodically, and really dive deeply into the topics that we find are potentially of interest. And the last point I'll say, and I don't know how I'm doing with time, hopefully okay. The last point I will say on what we do beyond all of this. So what I've laid out is kind of what we found works mostly in what you could call developed markets. So markets where there is, it is possible to sell into schools. There is a business model there. You can invest behind it, make a return, and support research at the frontier. But actually, a lot of the world doesn't necessarily look in this way. And the first, our own home market, Switzerland, is a very interesting case. You mentioned Hong Kong being a small city. Switzerland has its own governance challenge because it's not really one education system. Education in Switzerland is decentralized at the cantonal and even at the local level in some cases. So we don't have one education system. We have 26 education systems. And we have a kind of what you call under digitization in the system. So you don't see ease of schools engaging or using technology. And we try to think about how to help stimulate that. So we are supporting the EdTech Collider, which is a kind of a hub that hosts EdTech startups in Switzerland. We have Pierre Dillenburg from the EPFL, which is the host organization, the Federal Polytechnic University, Switzerland, who will speak a little bit about that. But we're trying to essentially create test beds where these companies can get into schools, can learn about how the products are being used, and we get schools to be more comfortable. We also work with Bitmark, which is trying to establish standards in this space around data protection and other things. Then we look to introduce the idea of evidence to early stage ventures. So here we've looked at accelerators globally. We run a competition with Mindset in Israel. We have created a curriculum with digital promise around using research and design. We work with Learn Launch to also deploy a curriculum, and we're working now on a partnership with the EdTech Hub, focused on Sub-Saharan Africa with the Gates Foundation, where we will essentially support early stage organizations to strengthen their evaluation systems. And lastly, on systems, we have identified, and we continue to identify, promising not-for-profits that work in our target geography. So that's Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and Sub-Saharan Africa, and help strengthen the way they measure learning outcomes. And we've created an impact-linked finance fund, which is essentially a vehicle focused on Sub-Saharan Africa and Middle East, with the idea of paying enterprises for their impact on learning outcomes. So we believe that because there's not a strong market for in these geographies, if we can put money on the table when these organizations can prove they've improved learning through their products, this will stimulate downstream investment activities and help strengthen the sector overall. So hopefully that made some sense to everybody. I see Rachel, so I'm happy to hand back to her, and thank you for the opportunity to share our work with you.
Wow. Thank you so much, John. You are doing many things that I always dream that we can do in Hong Kong. So I hope that today you can inspire some of the people in our audience to learn from what you have been doing.